Hi, I'm Miranda from Abby's Attic, and today we're doing a video on how to pin and cut properly with a variety of different patterns and some fabric differences. To start out, we gotta make sure we have all of our stuff. I have my pattern here, pins, my scissors, and of course some fabric. As you can see, this piece has already been cut out. Notice we got it right against the edge over here, which means that I can now cut one out over here. If I had put my guy in the middle, I'd have two little strips that are not big enough for a whole nother piece. Where you place your pattern on your fabric is really important. This guy has a front and a back, so he's a cut 2, which the pattern piece will tell you. So I have 2 layers of fabric here put together, and I'm gonna pin them and cut them together, so I only have to do this once. It's gonna save me a lot of time and a good amount of frustration. My pattern piece is flat on my fabric. I'm gonna reach over and get some pins. We're gonna start, I'm holding my hand on top of the pattern piece so that it's nice and steady. We're going to stab, push the pin to the side, lift the pin up. Now this is okay. My hand is still on top. And then we're gonna push it through that bubble. Stab, push the pin to the side, pick up the pin, see how it makes a nice bubble in the fabric? And then we can push that through. And once more, I'm gonna pin all the way around this so that all of my edges are nice and secure. Once this guy is pinned, I'm gonna grab my scissors. Now notice I've got my nice sharp silver scissors. These are for fabric only. I'm sure y'all have heard that before. I can lift it up a little bit to get the scissor underneath, and I'm gonna take my hand going with the scissor. Now this guy is a circle, so it's a little bit easier to rotate than going in a straight line. I'd have to move my hand a lot more. Now notice I am taking nice small little cuts. I'm not trying to do big ones because this is a curve, and the little cuts are going to help me get a nice curve. And I'm cutting all the way to the tip of the scissor. You can actually hear it. That snack right there is the scissors at the very tip coming together. You can always go back and clean up your edges. There's no rule that says you have to do it all at once. Now you noticed I turned my fabric. Your fabric doesn't have to stay still. You don't have to contort your arm all the way around. You can turn your stuff. 1, 2. Next one we're gonna do is a very strange shape. And it's not really a great layout for some pins. I'm going to use a fabric marker. You can do this with chalk or a regular marker if you don't have one. So we're just going to zoop and trace all the way around. If I have some smaller pins, I could always pin this guy in place and move the pins as I go. For instance, I'm going to do that when I get in here. So I got these guys pinned. And now that piece stays put, and I can draw these lines. I take those out. Now this is felt, so it's a little bit steadier. It does stand up, kind of like paper, which means I have a little bit more flexibility. It doesn't have to stay as flat, which is good because it's got all those jags and it might be easier for me to pick it up at some point. And here I am. Now notice I have changed my direction about 3 times now. That's part of that. You don't have to cut in one single go. If it's easier for me to cut one direction, I might do that. I've got to get in there, so I'm just going to fold it, make a snip in the middle. That gets me in the middle, and now I can go in. Now I have this nice little guy with all of his teeth, chomp, 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 ready to go. Our last piece that we're going to talk about is a pattern piece from a commercial pattern. So I know it's upside down right now, but this is a pair of shorts. And so they have sizes. You see the numbers over here pointing to the different dashed lines? Those are our sizes. And depending on the size that we need to cut out, we're gonna need to cut out along a different line. If I want a size 7, I'm gonna be cutting out along this tiny inside dashed line. We're going to cut out a 14 today. And the first thing that I notice is my 14 is on the outside all the way around till I get to here. This line right here is actually my 14. Now it's solid, which is great. I love this about commercial patterns. The dashed lines stay the same all the way around, so each size has its own dash. So I don't have to try and look really close at those itty bitty numbers. I can just tell that solid line is where I want to go. Now, I can't cut there without cutting off these sizes, and I want to keep these sizes. Say a friend wants a pair and they're a size 10. If I've cut that off, well, I can't use that anymore. So I'm going to take my scissors and I'm going to very carefully cut right to that line. I'm not cutting across it. If you do cut across it, it is not the end of the world. We have tape for a reason, so we are just going to keep on going. Now, I did a couple cuts all the way around. There's no rule on how many cuts you need. Just feel it out. Put a few there, and if it doesn't work with what I'm about to show you next, add a few more. So I'm just going to fold this all the way back to that line. It's going to create a couple flat lines rather than a super curve, but that is okay. It is curvy enough to follow where I need it to. Now notice I've just taken my fingernail and I've kind of squished each one. That helps keep those pieces flat. You can also do it with an iron. You can iron your patterns. It's great. It gets rid of the creases that are in it when it comes out of the fold. And if I have to fold to a smaller size, it helps hold all of those edges in. Next thing that we're going to look at is that this line is going to run parallel with this edge. So they're going to run together. I don't want them crossing each other because that would be no good. The edge that we're talking about is the one that has these strange little markings. Sometimes they're little holes. Sometimes it's a white line like this. But either way, it's a solid edge. It's not fraying when I mess with it. The cut edge is fraying. That's the one that we're going to have it crossing rather than running even with. I'm going to snug it up as close as I can to this fold. Again, this is a cut too, just like our coconut. So we have 2 layers of fabric. So we're going to pin all the way around. Notice I am keeping my pins inside of my size. If I had a smaller size, that would be doubly important, because if I pin here, but my size 10 is back here, I won't be able to cut it. With a 14, I'm getting off a little easy. I just put them inside the whole pattern. All right. Now, how many pins should I put in is kind of up to you. I like to get every single corner, and then maybe one in the middle of a side if that side is really long. For instance, up here, I've got 1 in each of my corners, and I want 1 in the middle because that flops a lot. The last super important thing about our pattern piece before we cut out is these little triangles. These are called notches, and we have single ones like this little triangle, and we have double ones like these 2 over here. Those are really important when we start sewing them together. They're like puzzle pieces. They help tell us which pieces go together. So we don't want to cut them off. We're going to mark them, which means I'm just going to take a pin and do that. And I'm going to show you why. So I want to be able to see this, so I'm going to do cut a triangle just like that outside of my pattern piece. I'm going to come along, cut, 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 and then I'm going to go whoop, whoop, and keep cutting. Now, I know for me it's super easy, even though I'm going to mark them, to cut right past them. I do it all the time, so if you do, that's okay. To help us, I'm going to put a pin across like that, and that way I can't cut that pin. It doesn't matter how hard I try. I'm going to damage my scissors, so I don't advise it. And I will see that pin and go, hey, I have a notch there. Maybe I should cut that out. I can start anywhere on this piece, but I have an edge right here, so I'm going to cut right here. Now remember how I talked about with that coconut? We are going to keep our hand right even with us. That's going to happen here too. Okay, I have lifted the fabric a little bit because if you can see, my scissors just rotated underneath to help me do this triangle. But now it's going right back down. And there we go. You can do that at corners. If you find it's really hard to rotate the scissor, just lift it a little bit and you'll give yourself some space. I'm just cutting along. I didn't put a pin there. Whoops, I cut off my notch. And that's okay, it's gonna happen. So instead, I'm just gonna turn my scissor in and I'm gonna cut a single slit right to the point of that triangle. I'm not gonna cut a triangle out and I'm not gonna go past it, but just a little snip. That way I don't lose that notch completely. I am detached from the rest of my fabric. It can slide away and I can rotate my fabric any which way I want now, which is good to help out if you find it uncomfortable to cut one way or the other. All right, I have a notch there. Now this is a double notch, which looks a little bit different than our single notch. So instead of a single triangle, it's two. But if I try to cut two triangles, it's just gonna get a little crazy. So I'm cutting just like that, and you see it has a little trapezoid. My geometry is a little out of date, but I think that's what it is. And then I'm just gonna keep on going. And now I've got two of my shorts front. We're gonna talk briefly about the back. Even though I am not cutting it out, I have another piece that looks very similar to my shorts front. And I need to cut that out as well. But the reason I snugged up over here on this side is because now I can take my pattern piece and I can pretend this is my back and snug it right in this little space here and see how close I can get it. I like to see all of my stuff on top, so I have a personal preference to put it here because I can't really snug up over here. I've got this space and that space would make it hard for me to do this second cut that I want right like this. I hope that helps you figure out your cutting and your pinning, and you are all set to get going with your project.